watching James. My name's James, you're watching me, and I am talking about watches. Welcome to my video of the full review of my Cronos L6005. That is the Submariner Homage by Cronos with the PT5000 movement. So why did I buy this watch? Well, there was quite a few different reasons really. Firstly, I wanted to try out the Cronos brand. Secondly, I haven't owned a Submariner Homage before. I wanted to see what all the fuss was about. I wanted to try one myself. I wanted to own one myself. So that's the second reason. I wanted a Submariner Homage. I also don't have a PT5000 movement in my collection. I wanted to see whether it was any good and I wanted to give it a try. And now the last reason is that I'd gone onto YouTube myself, watched lots of reviews about Submariner Homages, and wow, there are lots of videos about Submariner Homages. And there was a fairly consistent opinion from many of the reviewers saying that this Cronos is one of the best value Submariner Homages, both from a quality perspective, but also not too expensive. Now, if you're watching this video and you're one of my subscribers, I do appreciate it very much. Thank you so much for the support. I also really appreciate all you guys that are leaving comments below. I always do try to respond to every single comment. If you haven't subscribed, it's super easy. You just click on that little subscribe button. I would love for you to leave a comment and I will respond to that comment. Now, if you get to the end of this video and you think, yes, I need to purchase that Cronos, that's amazing. How have I lived to this day without this watch? Then I'm going to leave a link down below to this watch. It is going to be an affiliate link. That means I earn a very small percentage from that purchase, but it doesn't cost you any more money. I use any money that I earn throughout this channel to buy more watches. Yes, I get to enjoy those watches. I'm not supporting a business, I'm supporting my watch habit here. However, it does give me more content to be able to put out here onto YouTube. Now, when I did purchase this watch, it did have a bit of a QC issue, which took a little bit of effort to have resolved. Now, I am going to talk about that, what the issues were, and how the resolution came about. But I'm going to do that at the end of the video. So if you're not interested in that, you can stop the video after the review section. But let's do the review now. Let's flip it around, do the review, and then I'll come back to me and I'll have a chat to you about the problems I had with the watch and how I got it resolved and what that resolution was. Let's check it out. So this is my Cronos L6005. I bought it from the LGY watch store. It comes in this standard packaging that you'll see in a lot of watches nowadays. I'm quite happy with this packaging. It's nice and secure, keeps the watch nice and safe. What I do have to say and what I do like is that the watch came with this absolutely amazing spring bar removal tool, and it is actually signed Cronos. Okay, you're not going to buy this watch just for this tool, but I have to say it's better than any of the other ones in my collection, so I'm very happy it came with that. Also came with a few spare screw links for the bracelet, a warranty card which is actually signed, a little screwdriver, the spare links that I had, and it did come with a few more spring bars as well. But here's the watch for you to have a look at. So I bought this one from the LGY watch store on AliExpress, and it cost me around about 330 Australian dollars. And that's about what this watch retails for. It does go up and down just a little bit, depending if there's sales or not, but that's about generally what you should be paying. If you're paying more than that, you're probably best waiting for one of the sales to come up. And as you probably noticed, and as you're probably aware since you're already watching this review, this is a very close homage to the Rolex Submariner. Obviously, it's not a Rolex itself, it says Cronos on there, but this is the type of homage that is really using the same dimensions as the watch that it is homaging, rather than just being inspired by it. And that being the dimensions of a 41mm case diameter at the widest point. It is 13mm thin without that Cyclops included. It is a lug-to-lug of 48mm, but it does have male end links on here, so it gives you an effective lug-to-lug of 51.8mm. And it has a lug width of 20mm, but that actually tapers down to about 15mm, then back to the clasp there. And sized to my 6 3/4 inch wrist, this one weighs in at 148 grams. So under that top hat sapphire crystal, and it is sapphire crystal, and it also has a sapphire cyclops there, we have a very familiar dial. We have this lovely, beautiful piano black type color, both on the dial itself and on the bezel insert. I call it piano black, but it's just that very nice, shiny black, very deep, very dark. And on that dial you have these lovely applied indices. They're quite nice and thick, so they actually cast a little bit of a reflection on that piano black dial, which is quite nice. They are polished silver filled with lots of lume, and that lume giving you that white sort of colour within those indices themselves. Same with the hands, we have that classic homaged Submariner hands, polished stainless steel, pencil minute hand, Mercedes hour hand, and that lollipop on the second hand there. We've also got the Cronos logo. That is also a polished silver and it is applied. And then we have some printed text on the dial as well, being automatic, 200 meters, 660 feet, and then that printed minute track around the outside. So I opted for the lume pip only, not the full lumed bezel, but it does have that nice crisp blue lume. And I'll throw in some lume video now, and you can see how beautifully blue that is and quite how strong that lume is as well. I have to say this lume does last significantly long and is a really nice crisp blue look. Really enjoy it, and it does last for quite some time throughout the night. Now, as I mentioned, that bezel there is that nice piano black as well. It is a ceramic insert. I opted for the option that only has the lumed pip. There is an option also with these watches that you can have a fully lumed bezel. I'm not as big a fan of that. I'm actually quite happy just having the lume dial, so I chose not to spend the extra money on that lume bezel. And that bezel is very nice, a nice action, nice look. It has a very slight downward slope down towards the case. It has a little scalloped edge to it, which is very soft to the touch, very nice tactile feeling. And the bezel action has a lovely, nice clicking sound, but it is very light. I can move it with one finger. However, there is absolutely no back play whatsoever, certainly no lateral or up and down movement. So it is very nice, however, it is a very light moving bezel, but it does have a very nice clicking noise. Now that bezel there is a 120 click unidirectional bezel, and just on the inside in that rehort area or rehort chapter ring, you'll see in between the bezel and the dial is a nice brushed stainless steel rehort. When you're looking down on it, you don't see it too much, but at the angles you can see it sort of flowing up towards that bezel, and it is a really nicely well done surface. Very well done. This now leads back down to the case. We have brushing on the top of the case. It is a vertical brushing. It is a very light brushing, so it doesn't stand out too much. It looks very neat and tidy. It certainly feels nice to the touch, as well as those edges. They are quite a sharp turning edge, however very soft to the touch. And that leads us to the sides of the case. They are high polish, and it is done really well. I'm really impressed by it. Obviously there's different types of polishing and different levels of polishing depending on how much money you're spending on a watch, and this one is done quite well. And on the other side we also have a high polish, that high polish coming up and continuing onto that semi-guarded crown. The crown is polished on the edge with the Cronos logo. Inside here we have a PT5000 movement. It has been nice to actually have this on wrist for some time to really feel and understand what this movement is like. It is a high beat movement, so you'll see that second hand is moving around nice and smoothly. But what has also been nice and interesting to see is how it feels to hack and hand wind, a hand wind in particular. It is very easy and nice to pull that crown out, and I've found when I first got the watch, the hand winding was a little bit stiff. It was very consistent, but just a little bit stiff. It has eased up just a tiny little bit, and it now just has a very nice firm winding movement. And as I mentioned, it also has hacking. So now I'm going to put this watch on the Timegrapher and see how this PT5000 movement is running. This is the first time I'm going to be putting this watch on the Timegrapher, so I'm actually quite interested to see what the results are. So as you can certainly hear, and as you can see, it's a high beat movement running at 28,800 vibrations. And I have to admit, I'm quite impressed by these numbers here. A 0.1 beat error, which is very low, a very healthy, almost perfect amplitude of 300, and it's running about -1, -2 seconds per hour. Prior to talking about the numbers here, I have left it on the Timegrapher for a couple of minutes just to see how it's moved up and down, and that's about consistently what it is sitting at. Well, That's a big thumbs up for this PT5000. I'm quite impressed. And let's talk about this bracelet that comes with the watch. Obviously it's a homage to the Submariner as well, both the bracelet and the clasp, but it is fully brushed. It is polished on the sides. It is a 1-link that is looking like a 3-link bracelet. It has solid end links. There is a little bit of movement on the one at the 6 o'clock, and there's virtually no movement at the one at the 12 o'clock. As you can see, they are solid. Whilst we're there, you can see that is a sterile case back, so there's not really much to talk about there. As I mentioned earlier, it does taper. It has screw links, and we have this homaged style glide lock clasp. It is polished on the sides, brushed on the tops. It has a safety latch, has a release, and we can see that it is a milled style clasp. It also has the glide lock system, so it has the on-the-fly adjustment, so you can move it back and forth, which I have to admit is actually quite a handy thing to have when you're out there, especially if you're in a hot day, wrist size changes a little bit, you can sort of adjust it whilst you're out there on the fly. And here we have it on my 6 3/4 inch wrist. It does fit very nicely onto me. Obviously, as I've mentioned a few times, the dimensions and the look of this watch is not unique to Cronos, but the size does fit my wrist. So obviously in the future, if I ever wanted to spend a whole bunch of money on a Rolex, I know that it would fit my wrist. However, that's probably an unlikely situation to occur. So as you can see, it has quite a flat case to it, which means it does sit up a little bit, but because of that lug dimensions, it does sit quite nicely. Having the male end links does take away from that somewhat, and you can see that it sits up a little bit with the end of that bracelet. So what do I like about this watch? What don't I like about this watch? And what would I change? Well, the things that I love about this watch is how beautiful that nice black piano style color is on both the dial and on the bezel. It is a really nice, deep, shiny black, and I love how it reacts to those applied indices and get a nice sort of shadow from the second hand and from the hour and minute hand. Overall, I think it's finished very well, and I'm really impressed by the feel and quality of this watch in general. However, I am a little bit disappointed in the final fit of the bracelet, both with the end links as well as the actual bracelet itself. There are a few spots where the bracelet does grab and it ends up squeaking a little bit on wrist. So even when I'm walking and just moving, I'll hear occasional squeak, squeak. And that does lead me into the QC issues that I have had with this watch. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip the camera around now, and I'm going to talk to you about the issues that I have had with it and how that issues was resolved. So this is a great homage to the Rolex Submariner, but it's not a perfect watch. But there aren't that many perfect watches around, and I think for this price that this watch costs, it is certainly a good watch and worth considering buying. But my particular watch, this one that I've been showing you, did have an issue. It had a bit of a quality control issue, and that revolved around the clasp. So I just want to tell you what that was and how I had that resolved. When you take the safety latch off, there's a little section there with a little spring type latch, and that is a homage to the actual glide lock clasp from the Rolex. But that little section which has the spring had been pulled out and was sort of sitting like that. And it's not meant to be like that. It was meant to be tucked in where you pull the spring up. Now I spent a bit of time trying to fix this, wondering what was quite wrong with it and trying to resolve it myself, but I was really struggling to do so. And after a bit of looking at it, I realized what the problem was. Inside the clasp itself, there are two little indentations, and that's where a little mini spring bar sits, which it connects that little clasp system. And those little indentations were offset somewhat. Now, they're not meant to be offset. They're meant to be perfectly aligned, so it all fits in there nicely. It's all neat and tidy. It's all lined up straight. Mine was not. It was very hard to get it into those two little indentations, and when I did, it was sitting off-center to the rest of the clasp. So I got in contact with the store on AliExpress, telling them the issues that I had. Now they did respond to me and asked me to send them a small video about what that was, to show them what the concerns were and what was the problem. After a little bit of then conversation with them, and it did take a little bit of time, not too much time, I was able to get across to them what the concern was and what the issue was. because they'd come back to me. I think they just thought that that little spring bar wasn't seated properly and that it had fallen out. They weren't really realizing that those indentations were offset. But I was able to communicate that to them at some point throughout the conversation. They understood eventually that there was an issue that couldn't be resolved by just pushing it in properly. They unfortunately didn't have any spare clasps to send me. And that was unfortunate because really for this watch, I wanted it to be perfect. So they couldn't make it perfect for me. But what they did was offer me a partial refund for the watch. Now, the way that I've now set this watch up, it does work, but it isn't as good as it should be. And with that partial refund, I guess it really offsets my disappointment in the watch. I can live with how I've set the watch up now. It does work, it just doesn't work as well as it should. And I guess with that discount added on as part of that refund, it really makes the watch probably worth the money that it is in the condition that it is. Now, I hope that made sense. If it didn't, well, I certainly understand. I don't think I explained that perfectly, but basically there was a problem with the clasp. I wasn't able to fix the problem with the clasp. They weren't able to give me a new clasp, and I got a partial refund. Okay guys, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate everybody who takes the time to watch all these videos that I put effort and time into making. And I do hope to see you in another video soon.